Welcome. I am Gioia Perugia, Storage and Collection Manager in the Jack, Joseph and Morton Mandel Wing for Jewish Art and Life. Our wing includes 5 galleries: the Rhythm of Life, manuscripts, the Synagogue route, Jewish festivals, costumes, and jewelry. It is considered the most comprehensive collection of its kind in the world. And today, we are going to have a view on a special part in the synagogue roof dedicated to the Italian Jews, to Italy. In these times, we heard about Italy a lot, and now we are going to see another aspect of Jewish life among Italian Jews. The synagogue route focuses on the importance of the Torah scroll in Jewish life, and our exhibition is focused on the synagogues themselves. We have 4 synagogues of 3 different continents. We can really travel around them, and one is from Italy, one is from Germany, one is from India, and one is from the Americas. And we have ceremonial objects of many communities worldwide, from Afghanistan, Poland, Morocco, Turkey, India, Yemen, North Africa, and so on. And here at the entrance of the synagogue route, we have the Italian synagogue and this beautiful set of Torah ornaments from Italy. I think that when we see it, we just have really a feeling of looking at a king with this lavish mantle made of silk and embroidered with gold threads, and the Torah crown, the corona on its top, and the Torah finials in a shape of a 2-tiered tower are on top, and the shield, which recalls the shield that the high priest had in the temple. This wonderful Torah mantle is from Rome, and is dated 1655. So it's 17th century. It's a very old piece. And the silver Torah objects were made in Venice in the 18th and 19th century. I like always, when we look at an object, it's important to learn also of their history, how they were made, when, where, by who. And because from a point of view, we see all this splendor, but I would like also to let you know about the history of Italian Jews, at least a little bit of it, and of Roman Jews. The Italian community is one of the oldest in the world, and the first Jews came to Rome already in the 2nd century BCE, but the big wave of Jews that came to Rome is after the destruction of the Second Temple in 17 CE. I'm sure that most of you know the famous Arch of Titus in the Roman Forum, where there is the high relief, where you see all the temple implements that were brought to Rome after the destruction of the temple. And together with these implements, also Jews came to Rome. And I can say even my family came from that time. And already by then, that's why also in Italy we have a special rite in the synagogue, the Italian rite, called also Bnei Roma, Sons of Rome, which is probably the rite is already rooted in the old rite in the land of Israel. And today, still, in many synagogues in Italy, we pray according to this rite. And even in Jerusalem and in other cities in Israel, this rite is used in the synagogue where Italian Jews pray. The critical point in the history of Italian Jews is the ghetto period. In Rome, the first ghetto was established in 1555 until 1870. More than 300 years, Jews were enclosed in a small area, crowded and poor, where they were forced to live separated from the rest of the city. But despite the misery and the difficult situation they had in the ghetto was also a microcosmos where Jews could live with their own culture, and there were cultural activities, and they were free to pray in the synagogue. And because they were poor in the houses, they could dedicate it and adorn their synagogues with beautiful objects, because the synagogue was the most representative place where everyone would attend and enjoy these beautiful objects. One of the limitations that Jews had during the ghetto period were the professions. One of the few professions that they could do was to sell second-hand fabrics, what they called strazzeria. And here, that's why we have these beautiful fabrics, because Jews became really connoisseurs. They knew how to choose the most beautiful fabrics to adorn their synagogues and the Torah scroll. These kind of fabrics were in use in noble houses, in churches, and they were remanaged to make a Torah mantle to cover the Torah scroll. And the silver objects, as I said, were made of Venice, and I would like to show you more of them inside the vestibule of the Vittorio Veneto Synagogue that we are going to visit very soon. So here we are in a small Italy, let's say. It's a gallery within a gallery in our synagogue route, all dedicated to Italian Jewish art. And we are at the entrance of the Vittorio Veneto Synagogue, and look at these splendid silver objects that we have in this showcase. They were made all in Venice, and they decorated the Torah scroll. They are in high relief, and they shine, and they were really, can you imagine the Torah ark full with these objects in each synagogue they had. Venice was one of another towns very important in the history of Italian Jewry. And actually the first ghetto, institutionalized ghetto in the world, was established in Venice in 1516, before the Roman ghetto, that was in 1555, until 1719. And in the ghetto, Jews also in Venice, they lived crowded. They even had these very high buildings that all the time they had even to cut the floor in two to have more and more apartments, and because there were so many Jews in such a small area. And, but still, as I told you, you can't feel from these objects how much the Jews were influenced by their surroundings. Jews in Venice were of many different origins, also the Italian Jews, as they were in Rome, and they were Sephardi that came from Spain, Levantines that came from the East, and the Ashkenazi that came from Germany. And actually this is, you know, the characteristic of Italian Jewry, that aside the Italian origin Jews, we have Jews that came from other places in some different waves of immigration. One of the professions that Jews couldn't perform was to be silversmith, at least even formally. Maybe there were some, and we don't know about it. So the Jews in Venice, we think, because you see the objects are very similar between them, and what we suppose that were special workshops that specialized in Jewish ceremonial objects, crown, Torah finials, shields. And the Venetian ceremonial objects were so famous that Italian Jewish communities all over would commit from workshops these kind of objects. And they are very similar between them, and sometimes there are little differences, for example, in the golden decorations that we have upon them. For example, here We see the temple implements. For example, we see the tablets of the law. And we also have, for example, the priestly benediction. And here we have a special symbol. We have the Temple of Jerusalem. Today is Jerusalem Day, Yom Yerushalayim. So we want to dedicate, this Torah crown to Yom Yerushalayim. Jerusalem was always a very important element in Jewish art in general, and also in Italy, because the feeling to come to Jerusalem, the importance of Jerusalem was a central motif in Jewish art. We have it in ceremonial objects, in marriage contracts, book bindings, and textiles, and in many, many objects. And of course, Jerusalem is always represented in the style of the place. Now, just a small thing that I also want to tell you. How do we know that these objects are from Venice? In addition to the style that we can see, we can see a similarity between all these objects, is also the hallmark, because silver objects have always an hallmark on it. And the one from Venice as the winged lion of San Marco, the same symbol of the town that we can see, for example, in Piazza San Marco in Venice. Now, if we have talked about a profession that Jews couldn't do, I want to focus on a completely different profession that Jewish women can do. And this is working with textiles. Jewish women were very famous. They were tailors, embroiderers, and they practiced these activities, preparing the dowry, and then they really made a profession in it, a profession that they could do from home. And here we have an example of a beautiful Torah curtain, a parochet from 1601, the oldest parochet that we have in our collection, that was made by a woman called Tovale Cohen Harufeh. Jewish women were very famous to manufacture textiles that were after donated to the synagogue, mantles, wrappers, Torah curtains. And there is even a special prayer that they say in the synagogue to thank women that made this kind of objects for the synagogue. And another curiosity I would like to tell you is that in the end of the 17th century, at the beginning of the 18th century, there was an Italian scholar called Bernardino Ramazzini that was the first person that wrote a book on occupational medicine. And when he talks about the problems, the illness due to all kinds of works, he also deals with problems of Jewish women that suffered very much of back pain and pain in their eyes because of the intensive work embroidering at home. Can you imagine these small houses in the ghetto, dark, and they work day and night, to maintain their families. And now, after we have learned many things about ceremonial objects that decorate the Torah scroll, I would like to take you to the synagogue, to the Italian synagogue. Here we are in the Vittorio Veneto Synagogue, which is dated 1701. The inscription, the Hebrew inscription of the Torah Ark, recalls the Hebrew date. This synagogue was used by a small community. Can you imagine? About 67 members of this community that lived in Vittorio Veneto for about 200 years, from the 16th century until First World War, when the community extinguished because Jews moved to other cities. This was a small Ashkenazi community because in Italy, as I told you, alongside with the Italian Jews, there were also Jews of Sephardi, Ashkenazi, and each one with their own traditions. And the synagogue, we see it's in a bipolar inner organization. We have the Torah ark on one side, the Torah desk on the other side, and the worshippers would sit on both sides on these benches. And it's important to know that the Italian synagogues, as this one, in the ghetto period, they were used not only for prayer, but also for meetings and study. And in the era of Venice, we even think that there were also performances and concerts. And not by chance, if you look at the women's gallery on the second floor, which runs on the four walls of the synagogue, we have, we can see a similarity with the galleries of theaters. This synagogue was, with no doubt, influenced by the Venetian synagogues in the ghetto and the 5 Venetian synagogues. They are very similar. And this idea, of course, came from Venice, because in Venice, they were created the first theaters in the world. Some of them, the first of them were made of wood, others of stone, and women would attend the synagogue and they were like spectators viewing below as they were looking at a theatrical performance. Now, why was the synagogue brought here? The synagogue was reconstructed in its entirety here in the Israel Museum because it was already out of use, as I told you, from First World War, and it was dismantled and brought here in 1964. Now that we are celebrating the 55th anniversary of the museum, we can say that this synagogue is part of the beginning of the museum, because in 1965, when the museum was opened, the synagogue was already here. All the space was conceived to include this synagogue. The dimensions are the real dimensions of the Vittorio Veneto synagogue. And even it is possible to go up to the women's gallery and have a look from upstairs, because what you can see from there, you cannot see from here. And I really hope that when the museum will open, you will go up and have a look at the synagogue from upstairs. And I would like just to say that, as we saw, the Italian Jewish community had a lot of ups and downs during its history, and a period of crisis, difficult periods, along with a period of big cultural, spiritual activities. And I am sure that the Italian Jewish community knew how to recover from these difficult times. And I wish, and I'm sure, that also now from this peculiar moment that all of us are living, that the community, the Italian Jewish community, will be able to overcome and start flourishing again. I hope you enjoyed, and I wait for you to the museum when it will be open again. Thank you.